Hey, what's up? This is Just Play Nonsense,
I'm Mike.
and I'm Rob. All right, so today's show, I'm expecting it to be a little creepy. I'm expecting to get some chills. We brought in another guest, second guest ever. This is one of Michael's guests, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and introduce him.
Hi, this is Michael. Introducing my guest. This is you can refer to him as Clark. He is our specialist on creepy stuff. So, Clark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're here to talk about?
Well, I'm here to talk about what I like to call the edge. And over the past 16 years, I've been really interested in things that are strange. I'm sort of an amateur on it, but doing it for so long, kind of in the background of other things that I do, don't make any money off it or anything like that, but it just interests me. And the reason why I call it the edge is very simple. Things like the Loch Ness Monster, things like Bigfoot, and even now, such as things like the Mothman, they've become so indoctrinated into our society as an acceptable thing to see on television and movies. They've kind of lost a little bit of their magic. They've kind of lost a little bit of their appeal and mystery.
Yeah, it's one of those things you see so much
Exactly.
that you pretty much get desensitized to it.
Yeah, it's no longer
Exactly.
creepy.
Right.
So the things that I specialize in are still considered mainstream amongst the community. It's just they're probably a little bit lesser known because there's not as many sightings, or there's not a big body count, or they don't make international news, but they are still very important in a whole.
When you say body count, are you talking about like these things have killed people?
There are reported cases of people going mad,
Okay.
of people dying through heart failure. I mean, you name it. I mean, but as far as like it making big international news, when a creature is cited as many times as such as Bigfoot or
Quote unquote sighting.
sightings, it gets a lot more airtime and a lot more play, worldwide. I mean, you could probably walk down the streets of Italy and say, "Do you know what a Bigfoot is?" And they would say yes.
Okay.
You walk down the streets of, Egypt, anywhere in Egypt, and say, "Do you know who Spring Hill Jack is?" And they're probably going to say, "Who?" They're still important. They just have not found the marketplace yet in society for somebody to make money off of it and to get it out in front of the mainstream as much as something that's been cited as many times as a sea monster or a mermaid.
Okay.
Now, a quick question: have you done any investigating on your own?
Yes, I've been as far as cryptids are very difficult, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. But as far as ghosts go, and demons and things that would be in what I would like to call a paranormal event, I've done that about 9 times, and it's been a completely eye-opening experience each time. It gets more and more intense.
Interesting.
But as far as something like UFOs or cryptids, that's a different thing altogether. That's one of those where you just kind of have to be at the right place at the right time. When you're talking about going to a haunted location, you can pay someone to stay overnight. You can plan everything. When it comes to UFOs, it appears. When it comes to something like Bigfoot, it just appears. You just kind of have to be at the right place at the right time. I don't think that you're going to be able to plan an event where you could go out and spend a weekend in the woods and, hey, we're going to see Bigfoot. No, but we can plan a weekend and go and stay and experience a paranormal event.
All right. Well, I guess you're wanting to take off with
A slight explanation, yes.
Yes.
Well,
especially with cryptic and stuff like that.
what there is there's 4 pillars. And what there is when we talk about a paranormal event, we talk about anywhere between the 4 pillars. And one of those is cryptids. Cryptids is basically an animal that's is not discovered, which is your Bigfoot, your unicorn, your leprechaun, anything that's not been discovered. The full term is cryptozoology. And that is the study of creatures that have been not discovered yet, or mythical creatures. Even as far as back in medieval times where they believed in dragons or griffins, those are part of the cryptid chain. That's one pillar. The next pillar is basically ufology. Ufology is the study of aliens and UFOs. That's in its own category. Now, your third pillar is any type of paranormal activity as it pertains to the afterlife, ghosts, demons, shadow men, anything that deals in like a haunted location or a possessed object. And and the fourth would be other. Other would be things like time travel, dimensional warp, secret societies, things like that. They're still wrapped in the same twine. They're just a different line. And these people get together and they basically feed off of each other and help each other because they're all on the fringe.
I see.
So those are the four main pillars. And one of the things that I worked with when I was in school down in St. Petersburg, down in Florida, was I got connected with many people who were very interested in it. And we went on several, what they like to call haunts, which I later called a paranormal event, where you go somewhere and you experience something. There's all across this country and the world where there's always, everybody's always got some type of story where you pull a vehicle up to the railroad tracks and you sprinkle baby powder on the bumper of the car, and the children who died in a car accident through a school bus, if you put your car in neutral, they'll push it. If you experience it, it's called a paranormal event. Something actually physically happened. But that is easily described as far as anything. If you were out in the woods, we call it a paranormal event. If you see a Bigfoot, because it's an event that took place and it needs to be categorized and logged.
See, when it comes to this kind of stuff, like I'm listening to all the stuff that you're saying, and I guess I'm so much of a logical thinker. Like I think more logically. That stuff that just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, it wouldn't make sense to somebody who it falls into one of the four categories
right.
that I came up with for a thesis and a paper that I did in school. We had to basically come up with a theory. And I have a theory about how that all works. And it's very simple. One of the four, the main one, is what I like to call negative positive. A negative positive person is very logical. They're very intelligent in their own right. And they go into a haunted house and they've already made up their mind.
That sounds exactly like the way I would be.
Exactly.
Right.
They've already made up their mind that there's no ghosts. They're not going to experience anything. And that even if a ghost itself manifested in front of them,
you'd find a way.
In front of them, a negative positive would find a way to explain it away.
Right.
I haven't slept. I'm hallucinating. There's a gas leak in here.
That's me to a T.
Exactly.
That's exactly me.
Those people, and please keep in mind, all four of these can change.
Okay.
The next one would be a positive negative. A positive negative is someone who enters a creepy woods or gets inside a possessed car and wants to experience something almost to a fault. They go into it going, man, I can't wait for something to happen. And then the minute a bird lands on the roof of the car or a leaky pipe makes a drip, oh, I heard a ghost.
Right.
Those people want it so bad that they kind of just aren't sure.
Right.
Now, you can change either way. People who are negative positive can have a out of body experience due to a car crash or being worked on a surgery table and lift themselves out of their body and see that and be an aura and look down and see their body. They can change. There can be a traumatic event in their life, or they could literally go into a haunted house and have such a traumatic event. They can now change. The third one is what I call a positive positive. And how that works is those are your mediums, your people who are able to walk into a location and see dead people or communicate with dead people. Some people are actually ghost writers, and that's people who communicate by going into a trance and scribbling on a piece of paper what the ghost wants to say, or drawing a picture of whoever's in the house or location that happens to be dead. And we see this time and time again with people who visit location after location after location. You've got the show Ghost Adventures, where you have people who do this 16, 20 episodes a season, and they're being locked in for 3 days. They eventually make the transition into a positive positive, where they become more connected.
Right.
And being with people who've been to multiple sites and being virtually new, they'll be like, "Did you hear that?" And I'll be like, "No, I didn't hear it." And then they will replay their voice recorder back and turn it up. And I'm like, wow, there really was something there, because they're already tuned into that frequency. They know exactly what they're looking for.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with, well, I've got better hearing than you. It's like they've almost made that transition from a positive negative to a positive positive. And they
Okay.
felt now they have the ability to connect with the paranormal world, and it's like their aura changes. It's like now they become a vacuum and they're getting the information. The
I
other
see.
thing, the other thing we find out is in a lot of these instances when you have a group of 4 or 5 people that will go into a haunted location, reportedly, they will have one person that's influenced more than anybody else. They will have recordings, and I've been there, and they sound very creepy, where you have a ghost or an entity, whether it be a demon or whatever, and it'll say, tell Sherry to leave. Well, why her? What's the big deal? And a lot of times these are the most skeptical people
Okay.
because
They're bringing the aura
yeah,
down.
they're walking in and being like, ain't nothing gonna happen. And there's a lot to do with provocation. Provocation is when you walk into a place that's reportedly haunted, and you call the ghost out. You're a little or I don't believe in you, or this is stupid stuff. Or they go in and they break things like windows or whatever,
Right.
and then the ghost is going to have to step up its game or whatever it might be, and it will say, you need to get out. Well, who are you talking to? And the recording will specifically say certain people.
Okay.
The fourth is very difficult. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking negative, positive, positive, negative, positive, positive. Obviously, the fourth one is negative, negative.
Right.
And I feel because of my past events, I'm negative, negative
Okay.
because of how when I walk into a room, things change. You can feel it in the air, because I believe that whatever this is, because everybody's searching for life after death when they're going on these researches and going on these adventures looking for ghosts, they're looking for proof for life after death. As it pertains to the aura, I believe that the negative negative is almost like a vacuum. If you're positive positive, those people walk in, they create an energy, and the ghosts almost kind of walk up to you and go, hey, I can feed off of this energy, and I can communicate with this person, and they can hear me and they can feel me. Negative negative is almost the other way around, almost like a psychic vampire. I walk into the room and the ghosts or whatever might be in there will be like, whoa, they're gonna drain energy from me.
Huh.
And it has nothing to do with, oh, that's a negative person, or he's a bad person, or he's committed crimes, or he's seen a lot of death in his life. I don't think it has to do with that. I think it has to do with just the way your body produces a type of energy.
Okay.
I mean, I think Mike is pretty much straightforward into thinking that he produces a type of positive energy, and I produce definitely a type of negative energy. And I think he can pretty much contest that I have that ability. And sometimes that works in my favor, and sometimes that works in a disadvantage. The very first haunt I went on, I saw absolutely nothing. I experienced absolutely nothing. And yet the other 4 people that were with me were like, look what we got. We got this piece of wood moving, and the door creaking and opening and this and that. And we got voices, and we got this and that and all this stuff. Well, I was in another room,
Right.
and I'm like, these people are pulling my leg. I'm here wanting absolute information, and I'm wanting more I want to believe, but I want more information. And yet these people must be pulling my leg,
Right.
because it would be like, the ghost's like, oh, wow, he's gone. Now I can, now that suction of power coming away from me, now I can focus and do something. I think people experience this at a party too. There's always that one guy that walks around, and people kind of stay away from him because I don't know if it brings them down or if it
Right.
changes the way they are.
What you're talking about there is actually something that I've experienced before, where
Mhm.
you come across people and you can just kind of feel their personality a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that's something that's always been an interest of mine. It's like, what is that? Like, what causes that?
Exactly. And I don't exactly know what it is, but my theory states that there are the 4 groups,
Right.
and you can jump back and forth between them. However, when you become positive, when you become connected with spirits, and you're able to experience them, and they become opened up to you, that ability to go back is very difficult. When you're I believe when you're a negative negative, it's also very difficult. It's very easy for a positive negative and for a negative positive to change what they are. But when you reach that certain height, or I guess you could say when you reach that certain low, it's very difficult. And there was one particular instance that stood out for me when I was 20 years old, when I had come to the conclusion that that's kind of where I was seeing a girl just north of here from Mount Vernon, and I was kissing her goodnight, and I saw somebody peeking around the corner of her house. And all they were was a dark shadow. And I learned later, this is what really got me more interested in it. I learned later that there's a type of paranormal experience that you can have when it comes to shadow people. That would be a topic for another discussion, but shadow people are primarily not good, but they're lumped in that ghost demon category.
Okay.
And she looked at me and said, you saw it, didn't you? And
That's creepy.
And I said, I saw something out of the corner of my eye that looked like a head and shoulders and an arm peek around the corner of your house. And she goes, well, I'll see you next weekend and I'll explain everything. So the whole week I just said to myself, I didn't really believe in ghosts, but I didn't want to tell everybody I didn't believe in them 100% just in case they were real. I wasn't really all that truly interested in like I am today and have spent the time that I have today. But I go back to her house the next week and she tells me it's a very old house. And I'm like, well, are we talking 1920s? She goes, no, more like 1818.
Oh, wow.
And I just looked at her and she says, the inside's been redone. But when we bought this house, I was only about 12 or 13 years old. And the neighbor had told us that it was passed down through the family, and every other generation, which we find out through history and through research that a lot of powers skip a generation, or the powers only go to women in that generation, or they only go to men, or the third man.
Almost like physical genetics.
Exactly. And they carry on. And this particular property was purchased and only owned by a specific family to be given to what they call a white witch. And a white witch is someone who practices witchcraft on the good side. They're the ones that fight the dark magic and fight what we would call dark magic or evil. And they merely they help people who are sick or who are possessed. They're more like your good guys when it comes to the paranormal world. And she's explaining this to me, and it's at age 19, 20, this is blowing my mind.
Right.
I loved watching the X-Files, but it's just entertainment. It's not like the real deal. And she says, what you saw was a mistake. And she got very visually upset. And I said, what do you mean? And she had told me that the house had passed through the family for years, and it always went to the oldest female born in the family who is practicing white magic, and that she had several possessed objects that she kept in the basement. And her job was to help people that came to her, and she would transfer negative energy or a possession, a demon or whatever, into an object, and then she would contain that object for safekeeping. When she had passed away, she didn't have any children. So the passing down of the torch of the protecting these possessed items pretty much went to the bank. And when they sold the house, it was probably the most disturbing story I'd ever heard from about 85-pound girl that was barely 5 feet tall. And just for her to tell me this story was emotionally disturbing.
Right.
And her being 12 years old, we walked into the basement. She had showed me all these tables that were bolted to the floor and that were bolted to the wall. And she explained on these tables, you could see a stain of all these little rectangles on these tables. And inside the basement, on top of these tables, were fish tanks. And inside the fish tank, they were all full of filthy, dirty water. And what she would do is somebody would come to her with a problem, or they would say, a friend of mine is possessed, you need to come to the house and help me. And she would perform the ritual. And she would take a personal item from that person. I mean, not like a toothbrush or a teddy bear, but something from the house, and she would cast the evil spirit or demon or whatever has you from the person into the item.
Okay.
Then she would wrap it and dunk it in the water in the fish tank and then seal the top of the fish tank. And what that did is it sealed the demon or creature or evil spirit and contained it in water. Water is a very pure element, and water is the barrier that would seal it. I learned this much later, because when she's telling me this, I'm like, it's just going way over my head.
Right.
And this is really what drove me into it. And she said when we bought the house and saw all these creepy things down here, it was just me and my mom. They were divorced. So it was just me and her. I mean, what do you do with that stuff? You don't even know what you're dealing with. I mean, this is when the internet is in its infancy. So being able to look up what these things are and what they do
wasn't easy.
And they did what a normal human being would do in that situation after buying a house after a divorce and trying to get their life in order. They dumped the water out and got rid of the items.
I see where this is going.
And when they did that, they basically opened up a whole can of worms. And for them, it's like some of the spirits, whether they be evil or not, left, and some of them maybe weren't all that bad, and they hung around. Their keys would go missing. Their purse would not be where they laid it. They would make a bed, walk downstairs to get something to eat, walk back upstairs, and the bed would be unmade.
Huh.
Malicious things, nothing dangerous. But she said you would see things out of the corner of your eye. And I said, well, is that what I saw? She goes, I see them all the time. There's 3 of them. There's one that's about 3 feet tall. There's one that's about 5.5 feet tall. And there's one that's well over 7 feet.
Yeah, that would be scary.
And I said, what are you seeing? She goes, just a complete dark outlined shadow, almost like your shadow jumped off of your body and was walking around and peeking around corners.
So are these the shadow people you're referring to, or is this something different completely?
When I that's what really set me off, was doing the research. And shadow people don't do the things that she told me. What I believe is that these are spirits that maybe the White Witch had contained because they were more malicious and not dangerous, but that's just the form that we're seeing. Because when it comes to shadow people, the first thing that you'll learn when you go looking for them is that they are inherently dangerous. On a scale of 1 to 10, as far as danger level, 1 being virtually harmless and 10 being deadly, they are at least a 9, if not higher. Huh. They are the ones that tell little children to stick forks inside electrical outlets or jump out windows. There are many people that believe that they are creatures from another dimension and they have the ability to teleport to our dimension, but not in a full mass form, just in a shadow. But we did not know that back then. She goes, I don't know what they are, but I know no one's ever been harmed. I've never been touched in any way. They were probably curious about you because they've never seen you. Nobody really comes over to the house that much. We see them during the day. We see them at night.
On a side note, that reminds me, you ever heard of that band MGMT? They're kind of bigger in the early 2000s.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so they had a video, and in the video, it implied that children at a young age, like pre-toddler and early toddler stage, could see, these beings and creatures, and then they lost that ability as they get older. And like the music video, it's kind of implied. So is that kind of there's many a big correlation between the sacrifice of an innocent because they have more power. There's ancient cultures out there that sacrifice virgins and sacrifice children because they believe that they have more power. They have purity. They have more connection to the spirit world. It doesn't matter what civilization you're talking about, whether you're talking about the ancient Incas or anything like that. They all seem to believe that those type of people have the most power. Because that came to mind when you said about them whispering to kids to put forks in
Exactly.
outlets or things like that.
There is many instances where I have found that after a child has committed suicide in some way, the signs were there that something outside told them to do so. And naturally, the minute I found out what shadow people were, even when the little bit of research I was able to do back then, I told her, you need to get out of that house, But when she finally went to college and moved away and her mom left the house, I never returned to that house to that day. But they never did do anything, at least the entire time I was with her and the entire time that she was there, that she had told me, because I am still in contact with her. She told me that they never did anything other than little malicious things.
Now, do you think that's because they're limited to do something like stop a physical hard or conjure enough spiritual energy to physically do something enough to...
Yes, I think that when the White Witch, when she was asked to help, I think that there are many different tiered levels of power that whatever these creatures might have, and these might be some of the lower end ones. I mean, if she goes to help somebody, she's not going to show up to your door to help exorcise whatever demon or ghost or whatever that's in your house and go, oh, you've got a low level one? I'm not going to bother with that. I'm only here to take care of the big boys. No, she grabbed all of them, no matter what it was. And to this day, she ended up growing up, and she actually has psychic powers herself. She is now a positive, and she does tarot card readings, and she has gone into several events herself. Growing up in this house and being near these things have opened her from being a negative positive into the positive and being able to connect in a better way that most other people can. And I thought that was just that was really the catalyst right there that really set things into motion for me for wanting to acquire as much information. Most of the places I've been that were quote unquote haunted were all in Florida, and it was in college, and I could see where event after event I would experience just a little bit more. You're not just going to walk into a place and all of a sudden, have chairs flying around the room and all things like that. It's a step-by-step process where you do it more and more and more and get better and better and better. It's just like if you ever play baseball, you don't just step out on the field and throw a 90-mile-an-hour pitch. It's a step-by-step process.
That makes sense.
And with that, that's like I said, that's merely one pillar of strange that's out there. But ghosts are a very hot topic. There's many locations that get more what I like to call showtime than anything, such as the Amityville house. Everybody knows it for the movie and this and that and another, but there are way creepier places than that. You have all these ghost hunting shows that are so popular and they do so well because they're very cheap to run, and they're always finding and they're always getting closer and closer, and they're always coming out with more and more equipment. I mean, the ghost boxes, and to hear them clear as day say your name, and nobody's ever said your name in that entire building, and now they know who you are. And I've been shown very, very equivocally by many people who've been to 100 locations or more, there is a chance of you bringing something home.
So they can actually become an attachment.
They can become an attachment, or they can become a partial attachment, where if they're powerful enough, they can send a piece of them with you. And when I mean with you, I don't mean come to your house and stay at your house. I mean follow you around to work, follow you to church. I mean anywhere you go. And 9 times out of 10, they're usually negative. The ones that have that much power, those are negatives. They have a negative influence on your life. So a lot of times what these people would do when they would leave is they would grab me by the shoulder and they would spin me around and face the building that we were in, and we would back up slowly, and we would rake our hands back and forth from our arms, back and forth, like we're wiping our forearms, and they would say, whatever was here will stay here. We take nothing, and we leave everything here, and nothing comes with us. And we repeat that over and over as we backwards step off the property. Doesn't matter if it's a cemetery, doesn't matter if it's a psycho ward hospital, doesn't matter if it's a prison, doesn't matter if there's low-level activity, it doesn't even matter if we don't catch a single thing. We do it every time, because the last thing we want to do is take something home to our families. And some of the big ghost adventure shows there and Ghost International and all that, they actually, if you go on their websites, there's been several times when they've brought home what I like to call bad juju, and dealing with it and having to go to someone like a shaman or a priest to get cleansed. It's a nightmare when you've got children and your wife in the house and you bring it home. So it's dangerous stuff. This isn't something that I would tell people, oh yeah, that house is haunted, why don't you go in there and spend the night and start. No, you need to either go with somebody who's been in one and done it, or you need to do a lot of research before you decide to go playing with fire.
Now, do you have equipment and stuff that you take with you when you go and do this stuff?
I have a friend of mine who has bought a lot of equipment, and this equipment is very basic. I'm the research guy. When he calls me up and says, "Hey, I've got a story about this house, and they say 10 zillion people died here, and it's 100 years old," I need you to look it up. I need you to get every type of information you possibly can to find out whether or not this is legit. And I'll call him back after a while and say, "This is what I got. I don't have any recorded deaths in this house." And he's like, "Well, you want to come out and go with us?" A lot of things that we see over and over are EVPs, which are electric voice phenomenon. Those are pretty simple. Those are pretty base. We get those a lot. The other one is orbs. Orbs look like little balls of light. They almost look like dust or bug particles. That's the one that I'm on the fence about. Even after 16 years of seeing probably 4,000 or 5,000 pictures of orbs, to me, I'm still undecided on whether or not that is anything other than a bug. And there's many, 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 many researchers that have had much more time than me and have been out in many more places, and they're on the same page, meaning the orb is just the very little tip of the iceberg. I want more information, and it only gets better every year. The Xbox has a device built into it called the Kinects. The people who created that technology, they use a Kinects with a different type of software to map a room, and the Kinects works by mapping out your body, your arms, your legs, your torso, your head. And then it correlates to the action on the game and on the screen of the TV.
Right.
The way the researchers use it is they say, "Hey, Kinects, look in this room and let me know if you see a head, a torso, legs, or arms." And we see this many times where we'll be talking or looking, and all of a sudden you see a torso with a couple of arms and legs just walking by. And you're like, what did the Kinects just see? There's nothing there. You can say, well, that's just a hiccup. Well, then it does it again. And then they'll switch the cameras out and use a different one, or take it to a different part of the house, or do it on a different day. Maybe there's a little bit of static electricity in the air. Maybe there's maybe there's power in the house. So we'll shut the power down or run off the batteries, and it still happens. The Kinects camera, the technology is just getting better and better every day. And a lot of people have the problems with the voice recorders. They'll buy a voice recorder that has the auto dampening, and the auto dampening is supposed to clean up the audio.
Okay.
You don't want that. You want the ones that play the static. You want the ones that record everything and don't dummy it down.
The raw sound.
The raw sound. They don't want it automatically filtered. And a lot of times they have to enhance and bring up the audio. But I believe that that's just all comes to the correlation of how much energy the person, if they are dead, has to be able to produce to get that sound. I mean, a lot of these people are literally screaming at the top of their lungs.
Now, see, that brings up a question for me. Based off of how you've described people when they're alive, they're positive, negative, negative, positive, and so on and so on. Do you think that carries on when you're dead?
Oh,
how much spiritual power you would have?
It could be. There are a couple instances when it comes to the actual haunting. Like there in Carbondale, they have the old mayor's house, and that is a residual haunting, and that's also like a recording. The story is a guy had went to the mayor's house and killed the husband and wife, shot him in the house, And that is just recorded history over and over. I don't think that has anything to do with energy as far as how they lived their lives. That's just a moment in time that was so traumatic, it recorded and it plays back. I believe that depending on how you lived in your life and whether or not type of energy you have, maybe when you die and you don't go into the light and don't pass over and you're stuck in that in between, it would, because a lot of people who were angry or who died, they feel like they died before their time, or who were bad people. When psychics go in or when mediums go in and they start experiencing people, oh, there's a small child here and there's a woman from the 1800s and there's this really tall, dark figure in the corner that's avoiding me. Those are your people that probably didn't have a very good life or died traumatically.
They were distant in their existence before.
Exactly. They have the ability to change what they look like when the medium comes to experience them.
So there's a sense of identity that carries over. It's not
exactly. And I also kind of have a feeling that some of these mediums, I wish I could see what they see, but I also have talking to many of them and being around them. I would always ask, do you see the people as they died? And they always say, you know, if somebody gets shot in the head, do they come up and try to talk to you with their brains hanging out on the side of their skull? And a lot of them say, not really, sometimes, or sometimes they just come up to you and they transfer their pain to you. And the mediums will be like rubbing the side of their temple. And I will say, what are you experiencing? And they will say, this person killed themselves by shooting themselves in the head. But that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing them as they want me to see them. But they're transferring their energy to me and showing me how they died.
So that's called an astral projection, isn't it?
Yes, it's basically an astral projection where the ghost or whoever it may be is like, you know what? I want them to know how I died, but how do I do that? I kind of show them, but this is the only way I can show them, by making them feel the pain I felt at that instant. Like people who've been burned to death, you'll see the mediums walk around like scratching their arm or rubbing their face, or they're pulling at their collar and they're like, there was a fire in here. Somebody got burned.
I see. So what you're saying is, like modern technology, like wireless devices, they're sending that energy signal like, to your brain, which is basically an electrical system anyway.
Exactly.
And it just reads, and that way they can get a clear depiction without being distorted of seeing something or hearing something physically.
Right.
In that sense. So that's why it's so detailed, huh?
Exactly. It's almost like that they're trying to relay. You've got your ones that try to relay the information, and the only way they can do it is by doing it that way. It's almost like talking to someone who's a deaf mute. They have their own way of communicating to you, even though you might not pick it up the way you pick up everybody else you talk to on a day-to-day basis. They have their own way. It'd be like trying to explain to somebody what a tiger looks like, and they've been blind their whole life. You know, everybody's got their own way of doing it.
There's actually a YouTube channel that's dedicated to that. This guy he's blind, and people will send him comments of what he should draw.
Right.
So he draws it based on what he's felt.
Exactly.
So, and this is interesting. It might be a little off topic, but he actually drew a car. Somebody said, hey, I want you to draw a car. And he drew a car. This man's like 40, 50 years old. He drew a car the same way like a small child would. And it looked like almost exactly like a little kid drew it.
Oh, like a side profile?
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of funny, just like it kind of shows you a little bit of how his brain works.
Right.
Because he obviously can't process through sight. So the way he determines what things quote unquote look like is by how they feel.
Right.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting to, because you're talking about the spirits and the demons or whatever will make the mediums feel certain things.
Exactly. They know that they can't walk up to him and have a straight conversation face to face. So they could transfer the information the only way they know how. A lot of the ones when I ask them, what's the most difficult thing to do? Not creepy or scary, but what do you find is most difficult? And they say dealing with the children. Children is the most difficult. And I would say about 80% of the mediums that I've run into, I don't know if this is throughout the world, but I see a lot of them in shows and stuff like this, and on TV, on YouTube videos, you name it. I see about 80% of them are women. But when I see the men go about it in a different way because men and women are different,
Right.
but they experience different things. And the children always seem to react to the women in a different way that they react to the men. But it's because they're feeding off of energy. I feel that the children feed off of energy just like the adults do, and that they're going to get a different response from the women as they do the men. Now, if you're just warm-hearted, they're going to experience anything.
Right.
And I say that's the most difficult. She goes, yes, especially when they're children that had died, like maybe, early 1900s, maybe in the invention of automobiles on down, because the relation, the information they're trying to give me is skewed, because the way they would explain how things happen and the way things were, especially being in a school dedicated to children, and saying that one of the headmasters beat me to the point to where I just passed out and now I'm here.
Oh, wow.
I mean, your heart just completely goes out, and a lot of the mediums tell me, and a lot of psychics tell me, that they just feel emotionally drained after they're in a location with children, because they're trying to do their job. They're trying to go in and communicate these, but when your heartstrings get tugged on, and they always tell me, when it starts getting personal, that's when I have to leave every time, because they are dead. All I can do is go in and find out who's here. Then I tell the researchers. The researchers try to document the evidence and document what's going on. And then at the end, if they're really good researchers, then they will explain to you who you need to get in contact with, whether it be a shaman or any type of like a Reiki master or a priest that can allow these people to, or whatever they may be, to either leave your house or go into the light. And it's just a process that a lot of people end up saying, well, forget it, I'm just going to move out. It's you know what I'm saying? It's too much trouble. And in some cases it ends up following them.
Well, I do have a question now.
Mhm.
Do you think, have you ever read or heard, or any of the people you spoke with that were mediums or whatnot, have you ever heard them say that they were talking with a thought was like a ghost or spirit, but it turned out to be a demon or some other being just messing with them?
Absolutely. It's actually worked both ways. One of the things is when they tell me is when they're in a haunted location, there might be ghosts, there might be a recorded span of time, like in the Civil War, where you see troops Civil War troops walking past your house. They've got no interaction with them. They've got shadow creatures, they've got demons, they've got all this balled into one location. They're like, well, this is a nightmare. The other instance that I hear them talk about all the time is a ghost or spirit that wants the people in the house to leave, so they make them seem like something else. They have the ability to make them seem like a shadow person or a demon, and they try to act that dangerous role when all they're trying to do is get them to leave. And then I've had ones that have told me that their most disturbing event was being lulled into a false sense of security, thinking that they were helping a small child or a woman who was beaten by their husband, who eventually died from it. And in one instance, it was a priest who was telling the medium that I can't leave because I need to, help people. I'm here to help these other spirits move on. I need you to help me. When in all actuality, he was the one that was keeping the spirits there. And because he was lonely and he fed off, he was feeding basically off of their power, their energy. So, I mean, you've got all these different instances where, because a demonologist is probably the worst job in the world. As I've talked to two of them, one by phone and one in person. And these people have congenital heart problems. These people smoke, they drink. They're usually single or divorced. They usually don't have a lot of contact with their children. And the ones that do have their life in order, they know how to handle demons. And a demonologist is someone who gets brought in who basically comes in after the researchers and after the medium comes in and says, hey, you got a demon. We don't know how to deal with this. This is beyond our ability. Most mediums, when they find out they're dealing with a demon, then they go off the property, do their cleansing and say,
they get the heck out of there.
Yeah, they do. They'll do their psychic cleansing. They will make sure that they don't take anything home. They will tell the people who own the property, you have a legit demon. The researchers will try to contact a demonologist and see how to take care of it.
Do you have a creepy story of a demon, like a demon messing with somebody?
When I was in school and we had one of the demonologists that was supposed to show up and he ended up having to be at another place, he did a video conference, and he had one instance where he went to a location where he was told that if there's not one demon, there's at least shadow people. Demons would probably be on a scale of 1 to 10 a 10, if not maybe even higher, what I like to call a papoon.
Because demons would have different levels, right?
Exactly. And this particular demon told him, I'm not going to mess around. I'm not going to pretend I'm a little girl. I'm not going to pretend I'm somebody, and try to lull you in. I'm looking for someone specific.
Now I'm getting creeped out. This is awesome.
Yeah, and it was in an apartment complex of a couple hundred units, and the demon actually was stuck on the property. It was brought onto the property by an elderly woman who had died, and this demon is looking for a specific person. But you'll never guess what this property had that kept the demon in it. Now, what did we say earlier about the fish tanks? This piece of property was in Georgia, and it had a little lagoon that went all the way around it. Demons don't like crossing water. So when the demonologist showed up, he said, you can't leave, can you? And the demon basically was like, nope, and I don't care. There's enough people here. I'll eventually find the person I'm looking for. And
I guess you're an infinitely living being. You're patient.
Exactly. He didn't seem to believe that it was what he would call a high demon, but it had to have been conjured by what they like to call an obsessibus, which is basically a high priest of Satan.
Oh.
Basically someone who can conjure the man himself. An obsessibus is basically a term for like a cardinal of Satan, a high religious, not just a bunch of teens that broke into a house drawing pentagrams on the floor and cutting the heads off chickens. These are legitimate, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
These guys are experienced and they know the ways. And he said this one must have been conjured, but this one had to abide by certain rules like they all do. And I told him, I said, what did you do? And he said, well, I had to contain him. I had to contain him by performing a ritual, not more like not an exorcism on a human being, but I had to lock him down into a location and perform an exorcism and contain him in a gourd or a flask. And I had to find a way to get him off of that property and to get him away from large groups of people, because most of the demons that they would run into would be in prisons, hospitals, retirement centers, apartments, places where there were large numbers of people. That way they could find the one that they could get what they're wanting. And they're wanting someone who's weak-minded. They're wanting someone who's easily played. They're wanting...
So what are they normally looking for?
They're looking for people who've just lost a loved one, and people they can attach to and make them do their bidding.
People that are very vulnerable.
Exactly, people who are very vulnerable. Whether it be children, whether it be young adults, people who are agnostic, people who don't really go to church on a day-to-day basis because they don't want to have to compete. But at the same time, the demonologists, they look at it as a job. They don't get personal either. because they know the demon will try to get a foothold in their personality, which is why some of the demonologists will just let themselves go. And because they've been affected by demons they've come to in the past. And there is I don't remember the ritual exactly, because demonologists are so hard to find. There's so few of them, and I've had so little run-in with them. They're kind of like the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow if you can find it. But they do have a specific ritual where we've talked about this before, Ward, where there's a lot of power in words. Their goal is to find out what the demon wants, where the demon is to lock it down, and most important, what's the demon's name. The minute they find out the demon's name, they've got him.
Oh, and for the listeners out there that don't know, one of my other aliases is Ward. That's why when he said Ward, he's referring to me, Mike.
Oh, sorry, Mike. We work together, and we always deal on a last name basis.
Now the listener knows my first and last name.
Right. But
now they're going to start stalking you.
Yeah. Well, my big thing.
Now my crazy fans, and it's hard to shake them now.
Yeah, my big thing was the fact that I always wanted what I like to call a paranormal event to happen to me specifically, to where I could tell people, I experienced this, I felt this, I did this, I did that. It didn't happen to anybody else, whether it be a spirit walking through me or an attempted possession. I didn't want anything dangerous or scary like a demon trying to take me over or anything like that. But I would always go to these locations, and it would happen to so many other people, and that comes with my theory about the positives and the negatives and stuff like that. Well, back in May, I experienced my very first paranormal event that happened to me and me alone. And this was kind of traumatic, because now I've had two things in my life that are real paranormal events. One that sets it off, and I had no idea what I was dealing with, so I had no idea what I was looking at or what I was experiencing until many, many years later. This one, I already know what's going on, and it happened. And Mike, obviously, you remember how this happened. I had just come home to my own home with my family, and now taking point, I believe that I'm a negative, so a lot of these spirits try to stay away from me because I absorb a lot of their energy, or I force them to work harder, so the ghosts figure, hey, I'm not going to go to this guy because it takes too much energy. I'm going to go to this guy.
The guy you bring with you.
Yeah, the guy you bring with you. Exactly.
You always bring a lesser guy. So he can get possessed.
Yeah,
you.
Exactly. And make sure he's much weaker in case you have to fight over a weapon. But
or you just got to be faster than
everyone. Much faster. Always remember where your exits are, and don't be afraid to jump through a window, even if it's the second story.
This sounds like the rules for Zombieland.
Right.
Rule number 3, cardio.
Yeah.
Rule number 4, always check the bathroom.
Yeah. Well, I told a buddy of mine, and he told me, he said, you finally experienced something just by yourself. He goes, how do you feel? And I said, literally, I thought I was having a heart attack. I thought, it literally felt like somebody was standing on my chest. And I had just gotten home from being out of town with my family, and my wife and my daughter were outside, and I have like a little porch. I went onto the porch, went up the stairs, went inside to get the dog, to let the dog out. And as I turned around to head back outside, went through the back door, started to walk down the steps, and it happened. And I will probably be on my deathbed, and I will probably forget just about everything that maybe ever happened to me in my Alzheimer's, but I will not forget this event. And I think whatever it was did that on purpose, because I mean, if you're in a store somewhere and you've been separated from your wife or your friend or whoever you're with, they try to get your attention. You come walking in after parking the car, and you see, hey, they call your name, or they wave their hand and they say, hey, I'm over here, and you're like, oh, they're over there. I think whatever this was knew that at great risk it was going to expend a lot of energy to get close to me, but it wanted my attention that bad that it had to do it. Now, my aunt had owned this house since 1939. It had been in the family. And she'd owned the house next door, and that house is 1881. And both these houses are side by side, and we're living in the newer house, if you want to call 1939 newer. I come let the dog out and he runs down the steps, and I go to close the door behind me. And as I get to the second step, I see a woman in a nightgown that I could only surmise, as my wife helped me being a fashion major, something a woman would wear probably in the 1930s as far as what she would wear to bed, a nightgown.
Okay.
White nightgown, lots of lace, probably satin or silk. She was probably in her mid to late 40s. She was very sad. And she came in through the door, and this all happened in what I like to call the blink of an eye. But when the event actually happens to you, it's almost like time slows down. So even though this happened from me taking my step from step 2 to step 3, it all happened, seemed like in slow motion. Like if you're ever in a car accident and it seems like it's going in slow motion,
Right.
This is what happened. And I think that spirits have that ability when they're trying to get your attention. I've only got this much power. I've only got this amount of time to give him or her the information. This is what I've got to do. And she comes in, she floats right in through the porch door and moves straight towards the stairs. And as I'm making my step to the third step, she comes directly up to me with probably the saddest face that you could possibly imagine. This woman looks tired. She looks like she's aging quicker than what she should. She looks desperate. She looks like she just got done crying. She has blonde hair, a few wrinkles on her forehead. She has blue eyes. And she comes up and she sticks both of her hands open, fingers extended as far as she can. And I could only guess, with me being on the stairs and her being lower to me, I could only guess that she was probably 5'5" to 5'4", because she stretched her arms out as far as she could into my face for just a split second and covered my eyes and covered my mouth and covered my nose and covered my entire face. And then she brought her hands down to herself and wrapped her arms around her lower torso, bowed her head, and started to walk away. And as she walked away in the opposite direction, she disappeared. Now, I know you've probably never had somebody jump up and down in your chest, but this literally sucked all the oxygen out of my body. I felt like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. I managed to make it across the porch and out the door. My wife had to grab me. She was about ready to call 911. She leaned me up against the car while she could go and get a lawn chair because we were outside. And I sat down. I could hear have you ever heard your heart beat in your ears?
I have.
I could hear my heart beat in my ears, and it was just going thud, 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 thud. And I was just trying to soak up what had just happened to me, what I felt at that point. And I'm trying to process this information. And whatever it was that she was trying to tell me, I think that she expended a lot of power just to get close to me and to let me know. And then she had to leave right away. Man, my grandma never experienced anything on that property, nor did my aunt or any of my other family members. The first thing I asked them is, did anybody die in the house or anything like that? But I started contacting people right away, and the people that I know are in several states over, but they all said that if a spirit is desperate enough, if a spirit has got something it wants to say bad enough, then it will leave certain locations and try to go to others. But normally, a ghost isn't going to jump from one house to 3 houses down just to talk to somebody, unless it's very important and they felt that person could relay whatever it is that they were trying to relay.
Did you ever figure out what it was that she was trying to get you to
Absolutely, absolutely not. The closest I could come to was the older house that's next to me is so old that if you mowed down low enough, you'd see where the old hitching posts were for the horses. That's how old this.
Oh, wow.
And the houses are just off of the historical block where they still left the brick road. And that's how old these houses are. The only thing I could get is the lady that lived behind me. I asked her if there'd anybody that died in her house. Because this is the first thing I did was maybe this spirit just jumped from one one lot to the other because they have to expend a lot of energy to even do that. Or maybe
Right.
wherever I went, I brought her with me. Well, I went to a mall and I went to a gas station. I mean, I wouldn't experience anything there. The only thing I could surmise is the way I explained it to my neighbor. She's in her mid 80s, and she's very spry for her age. She told me to come inside her house, and I went into her house, and she showed me a picture of her sister.
Okay.
And her sister, I would say about as close as you could possibly get to this image. Not saying 100%, but I'd say probably in the 90s.
Okay.
And I said, how did she die? And she said, well, she died in her mid 40s. She'd gotten sick. And it was one of those where she'd gotten sick, but they thought it was something else. So she was bedridden and she was being treated for XYZ when it was really ABC.
Gotcha.
But by the time they found out what it was
too late.
it was too late.
So why do you think she was sticking her hand in your face?
That I literally, I said, is there anything that she might have wanted to tell you, or anything she might have done? And she said, well, she didn't marry. She didn't have any kids. She was what they call a spinster, or, somebody who was wrapped up in their own work. I said, what did she do? And she was a librarian. And I asked her about the nightgown and stuff like that. And she says, oh yeah, she was a lady. So she, didn't buy the modern clothes, but she had older things, which would explain why she might have been wearing something from a much older time period.
Right.
Something that was passed down in the family. And she's not wearing sleepy pants and bunny slippers, with a SpongeBob t-shirt like girls wear today. She was more old fashioned, so she would wear the older time stuff.
The gowns and
the huge long all the way to the floor sleeping gowns. And she said, no, there's nothing I can think of that she would have wanted to tell me or to do or to come back. I mean, she died many, many, many years ago, 20 years ago. I said, well, did she die at the hospital? And she says, no, she died here in this house. Because being in the area that I live, those houses stay in the families for long times. They're passed down to generation to generation. House is a big investment for somebody in the 1920s and 30s.
Right.
So they pass it down in the family.
So do you think that she overheard that conversation, was like, oh, he didn't get it.
He didn't get it. He didn't. There was something else because the way it seemed like it was like, she's desperate. I don't know what to do. This person has been in, understands it and believes it. And maybe I could feed off of his energy. But then she got closer and was like, wait a minute, this isn't going to work, but I got to try something.
Yeah, I could feel like in that moment she'd be like, this is my last hope.
Yeah.
I gotta contact this guy. I want to use all my energy.
Exactly.
It's gonna tax me. And she gets there and she basically does an overshotted high five to your face. And,
yeah.
And then she, overhears the conversation and it's like, oh.
Well, we broke it down instant by instant. A buddy of mine's like, man, I can't believe she didn't say anything. It'd have been great if there was a voice recorder, because even though their mouths don't lip, even though the mediums don't see their mouth move, they still communicate. They still get the EVPs, or the electric voice phenomenon. They still get them. The form they're seeing is what they want you to see a lot of the times. A lot of the mediums tell me the form they're seeing is what they want you to see, not maybe what they really perceive themselves, which is why a lot of the people that just want you off their property, they make themselves look scarier. But when I described to a buddy of mine the way she looked, it was all like, she seemed pretty desperate, huh? And I said, yeah, like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And then it was, well, I've got to go because that's all I had.
If that was what she was trying to say, if she was just trying to say, look at me, maybe she just wanted you to just like talk to her sister.
To acknowledge and
you may have accomplished what she wanted you to do. Maybe she just wanted you to let her sister know, remind her, that she was just lonely and she just wanted to.
Well, I tried not to tell my neighbor, hey, this was your sister. I just was like, this is what happened to me. This is what I experienced. And being that she's in her mid 80s and very close to death, I find that a lot of people, when they reach a certain age, they become more open-minded.
Right.
That's odd. Yeah. Well, it's also weird. It's kind of like the opposite of we were talking earlier with a child in their infancy when they're early in life, they're more receptive. And, you know, when you're closer to death, maybe more receptive. I mean, think how people talk when they know they're going to die.
You got to remember, when you're a child, you don't have any worries. You don't really have anything to really worry about, and you have imaginary friends, and you want to interact with everybody, and you say hi to everybody, and you're experiencing new things. When you're, you know, a young teen, you're out spending time with your friends, and you're doing cool stuff, and then you start working, every day, and then you're raising a family, and you've got lots of things on your plate.
You can't receive really.
Exactly. And then when you're older, you're washing your car every day and mowing your lawn every day, and you're bored, and you're retired, and the kids don't call, and you're looking for that input.
So I'm going to have one question before we wrap this first part up. You referenced shadow people. What are shadow people?
Shadow people are definitely one of the stranger, and they're building themselves into being more and more popular. We're starting to see them in movies and stuff like that. So they're starting to gain ground. And what basically in many experiences that I've talked to people, they are about as scary as you can get, minus demons. And there's many theories as what people think shadow people are, but there's also lots of people that experience shadow people and they don't even know it. There's many people who've experienced traumatic points in their life. And one of the things that they're asked is, before the car accident, before your mother died, before this and that happened, did you see anything out of the corner of your eye? Did you see anything that didn't look right? Well, yeah, I kind of saw a shadow, but I didn't see the body that went with it. Well, that just could have been a doctor standing around the corner, and there was a light. They try to explain it away. And what a lot of people believe that shadow people are malevolent entities from another dimension that basically interact with our dimension, basically them being a higher being and saying that we can come in, and maybe they're sadistic. Maybe they get their kicks off, or maybe they get some type of energy in creating chaos and disorder in this dimension. Because I've never heard one instance and one report of somebody saying, yeah, I experienced a shadow person and it was great. You know, he made me feel pretty good. No, it's always been, I don't know what this is, or it came at me, or it's peeking at me from around the corner and it makes me feel very uneasy. There's not a single person who was like, man, that was great. You know, I really liked that. I mean, there's some people that said it was really exhilarating, but whatever it was, I didn't like it.
So do they just creep the hell out of you, or do they actually cause like any sort of harm, or?
There's no reported case of physical harm, but there's reported cases of them causing chaos that causes harm. There was a several instances where the shadow people seemed like they were like, oh crap, they can see me. I think I'll just run at them and scare them, or do something to scare them, because it seems like a lot of the times what they're doing is observing from a distance. When it comes to children and elderly people, it seems like they've got no problem walking right up to them, being like, hey, what's up, bro? But but with other people, with more like mid-range adults or young adults, they tend to be the ones that's lurking in the corner, hiding in the basement, or looking through the window. With a lot of the mediums, they try to stay away, and they try to look at from a distance. And then when the medium's gone, they're like, all right, they're gone now. I can get back to, messing with this family.
Anybody that can identify them.
Exactly.
Especially if they're interdimensional. Or...
Exactly. Because they always seem to be quite intelligent. I mean, you think about interacting with an 8-year-old, and the parent comes up and says, honey, who are you talking to? Well, I'm talking to, this man right here. Oh, it's just an imaginary friend. The shadow people seem to know that no one's going to trust a child. Or you have someone who's on their deathbed, who's have God knows what type of chemicals pumped into their body to keep the pain away, and a shadow person walks right into their hospital room and sits right next to them and tells them, I'm going to kill you. And no one can do anything about that. I'm just here to let you know. And having your grandmother tell you, and she's 96 years old, and she's on her deathbed, I'm seeing things. a lot of people, oh, grandma's just, she's getting old, she's getting senile, she's at death's door. You're going to start seeing things. They know who to pick on and who to leave alone for the most part. And I find it funny that spirits, ghosts, whatever you want to call them, know about shadow people, because one of the things they like to do with a lot of the mediums that tell me is they'll walk in to a place, and if the spirit's trying to get the people to leave, they'll pretend to be a shadow person, because they know that what shadow people do. So they're like, well, if I pretend to be a shadow person, maybe these people will leave because this is my house. But the medium will come in and they'll poke and prod, and all of a sudden the shadow person will get shorter and smaller, and then they'll start to fill in, and they'll be like, you were just a spirit pretending to be a shadow person. Why did you do that? Well, because I want these people to leave, and I know I could do that to scare them. Are you scared of shadow people? They would ask. Yeah, I try to stay away from them. So even the spirits try to stay away from them. Same with the demons. There's been several instances where they've said the ghosts have told, the spirits have told the medium, hey, I just thought I'd let you know that there's a shadow person here, or there's a demon here, or don't trust the little girl, or don't trust the old man.
Snap. That would be.
Yeah. And
I'd be, all right, I'm out.
yeah. And that's why a lot of times when I talk to these mediums, I'm like, so where do you live? I live in a brand new house. I cleanse my house, every week, or I live someplace where I know nobody has died, or when we go looking at houses, I make sure, because they want that disconnect. They don't want to be connected all the time. I live at least 16 blocks from the nearest cemetery. It's stuff like that. And every medium I talk to, and every one of them I've ever talked to has always said the same thing. Yes, I have been in close proximity of a shadow person, and the first time you're a medium going into a location and you see a shadow person, you just want to jump out the nearest window. The demons, they are the ones that lull you into a false sense of security. They always pretend to be something else, or they do better at hiding, or they make growling noises and trying to scare you. They start off at a scale. They try to do something easy. The shadow people, for the mediums, they're more like in your face. And a lot of the best mediums who are really good and can see and communicate really well, they used to be able to do it whenever they were children. And that many of them have said, yeah, I saw shadow people when I was a kid. They tried to kill me. They said, hey, if you want to come play with us, if you want to come and be with us and see what we look like for, not just a shadow, jump out that window or walk out into the traffic with the cars and get hit by a car. It'll only hurt for a minute, but then you can be with us.
Huh.
That's why I'm convinced sometimes when there is a child that comes from a good home and that does die, it is related to shadow.
Well, it's always
people.
weird. Like, even with my kids, my youngest one, when she's around, she doesn't know she's doing bad when she puts something near an outlet, or tries to put something in an outlet, or does something dangerous, or picks up something crazy. She never knows she's doing, so she's not going to try to hide it from me, but she never does it in front of me. She never does it when I'm 20 feet away. But when I'm doing something that's going to guarantee occupy my time, like using the toilet or something, and I come out, that's when she's got scissors. That's when she's putting something in the outlet. That's when, it's every freaking time. And it makes you wonder. It's like, huh.
And it seems like my biggest question when I first experienced it was, are there a set of rules or guidelines that these things have to follow? And it seems like that if you're a spirit, and if you lived in a house for 30 years or 50 years of your life and you died there and you don't want to pass on, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to haunt that location if you don't want to move.
Gotcha.
Shadow people, no boundaries, no nothing. Demons, they have a law, a code. So the shadow people I put up in the 9 range because they're just everywhere. They could be out in the woods. You could be out looking for Bigfoot. You could be out looking for the Loch Ness Monster.
So it's almost
and
like
the shadow person.
It's almost like a demon's like LeBron James of basketball. He's sitting on the bench. He follows the regulations, but the day he doesn't, crap.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas a shadow person, they don't follow that line, and they seem more dangerous, but they're not.
Yeah, they're like Dennis Rodman.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah. They are the most difficult to get because we know so little. There's books and books and books and books and books on demons. There's books and books and books and books and books on ghosts and different experiences. Shadow people is what I like to call on the edge because we have so little information. And shadow people do the same thing.
So like spiritual douchebags.
Yeah. They're definitely the asshole of the spirit world because they can pretend to be a little girl. They can pretend to be a demon. They can pretend to be just about anything. But they're more of a, I'm so good at doing what I do. I'm going to convince you to kill yourself.
Mm.
We're gonna have to wrap this up for now.
Okay.
We can continue this in the second one.
We're doing a part 2 to this.
And this has been really, really interesting. Just for me personally, though, like I said at the beginning, I've always been skeptical about this. I always look at everything logically. So no matter what happens, everything that you've been saying, it's all I keep trying to explain away.
Mm-hmm.
Like I keep coming up with reasons of why things are the way they are. So
Right.
I love looking at things from different perspectives. I'm
Exactly.
incredibly open-minded.
Well, that's one of the definitions of intelligent.
Right.
If you can see something from somebody else's point of view.
Right. But anyway, we're gonna continue this on the next one. Make sure you check back next week for part 2 of this podcast, and make sure you check us out. JustPlainNonsense.ninja. All right, we'll see you later.
Out.